All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure others will join us as we move through the webinar, but in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get going. So welcome again. This is Shannon Robshaw with the TA Network. I'm excited today to have Sara Savage from Maine and Karla Bennetts from Nebraska here to talk about building capacity for peer support. And when we talk about that building capacity, we're really talking about that in a number of ways, including how do you actually recruit people to serve as peer support providers, how do you develop them, train them in build their capacity to deliver that service, and then also using peers in different ways to really build capacity of the network that we know is always such a challenge in rural areas. So that's what we're going to be hearing from Sara and Karla about today. I also just wanted to make a couple little housekeeping announcements. Myself and Sarah Warner are key points of contact for the Rural Behavioral Health Learning Collaborative. We invite any feedback that you may have or any suggestions for future webinars. Please contact myself or Sarah. There's our email addresses. And our next webinar is going to be on September 7th. And we're going to move to quarterly webinars following that date. I'm hoping on September 7th we'll hear from HRSA's Office of Rural Health Policy about some opportunities and support they have to offer for rural communities, but we're in the process of finalizing that. So let's take just a minute and figure out who all is on the phone with us today. We'd like to know who we're talking with. So if you could answer these poll questions, that would be appreciated. The first question is, my organization can best be described as which? Please check one of those. Family organizations, Medicaid, mental health. Okay. Mostly a local mental health agency, but close second is family organizations. So thank you for that. Helpful information. And the next question is, what can your role best be described as? Family engagement lead, SAMHSA grant director, executive leadership, family support providers, academician researchers, and other. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so Sarah, I've skipped into your slide. I'm going to let you take it from here. We're going to get started with Sara Savage, and our general approach is that we're going to let each of the presenters speak for a while, and then she can take questions at the end, and then we'll move into Karla's presentation, have questions again at the end of her presentation then. So Sara, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Shannon. So my name is Sara Savage. I work for Youth MOVE Maine in the northern region of the state. We are a statewide organization, so we have 3 regional offices located in southern, mid, and northern Maine. We typically cover about an hour radius from each of our main bases, which covers a decent amount of urban territory, but a lot of rural space. We have regional staff that travels to provide one-on-one peer support services to young adults in that radius. We try to cover as much of the state as possible, although obviously we can't quite do that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into that. We do provide youth peer support training. We have our organizations training, which is a 3-day youth peer support training. It borrows from a few different models and is inclusive of also the state of Maine certified intentional peer support training. It's typically an 8-hour 3-day training, which includes real-life examples as well as activities, role-playing, team building, etc., to try to be really inclusive of all different learning types. So we do have young adults employed through Youth MOVE Maine who travel to participate in the training. We have invited other agencies and organizations to participate as well, which is really exciting because we can kind of expand the peer support ideals across different boundaries that exist. So we have done the training with case management organizations as well as behavioral health professionals in order to try to get the ideas of peer support more ingrained in what we are offering as far as the mental health field goes. Within the first year of employment at Youth MOVE Maine, we do require that all employees complete the state of Maine's intentional peer support training. That's a 9-day training that focuses mostly on adult peer support services, but that combined with our youth peer-to-peer training really gives an all-inclusive training platform for our staff to work from. We do have weekly supervision, which we've done multiple different ways. So working in kind of a rural area, it can be challenging sometimes to get to the main office to do check-ins. So we have done that through phone calls. We've done Skype. At times when things are really, really busy, we might do an email kind of check-in. And that's really to just make sure that we're staying true to what we are offering as far as peer support goes. We really want to make sure that we're using our models effectively and that we're providing support to other individuals in the field who are practicing peer support services. In combination with that, we also have a pretty extreme network in the state of Maine as far as peer support goes. There are a lot of different learning collaboratives, there are a lot of different boards, there are a lot of different organizations that are practicing peer support in their own capacity. So there is a statewide peer support network that brings peer support employees from across the entire state together. So they have actual regional meetings as well in Bangor, or Northern Maine, Mid-Maine, and Southern Maine, as well as the SAMHSA Certified Intentional Peer Support. They also do what we call co-reflections, again, in Northern, Mid, and Southern Maine, where you bring peer support employees from all over the state together to talk about successes and challenges, to review the models that we use, and to identify any places that might need additional training, or maybe some more support in certain areas where they're maybe facing challenges that aren't super common, or maybe they are common and maybe it falls back on these organizations to help to support these challenges to move forward. There is a pretty wide network in this state of both adult and youth services. We're one of the main organizations providing youth services, so we kind of end up being the crutch of a lot of youth peer support work or youth work in general, which can look really different from adult peer support services as we combine a lot of activities and programs into our work outside of the one-on-one program. So as an organization that's trying to cover most of the state, we do offer virtual support, and that varies quite a bit depending on where the young person we're supporting is, as well as where our staff is located and what we have for available time to meet. So some of the more rural referrals that we get, we can try to meet as often as we can, which usually might look like weekly if possible, though at times it can be biweekly, and for some young people ends up being every month or every other month. But we do offer peer support through some different options as well. You know, Facebook is a big one. We get a lot of chats Facebook Messenger, things like that, where we can provide as much support as we can in that capacity. We've also done phone calls. We've done video chatting through like Skype or Google Hangouts or even Facebook as well. We also provide cell phones to our staff, which is exciting because we are able to text our young people even when we're not able to meet with them face-to-face to really make sure that that connection's maintained even when there might be lulls in the face-to-face meetings. We try really hard to meet each young people where they're at, or each young person where they're at. So we really try to negotiate with each person what that connection is going to look like. We do typically try to roll in at least some one-on-one meetings and they're always invited to our events and programs and things like that as well, especially when they're more rural. I see there's a question come through about Facebook messages. So we do have one person who kind of manages the Facebook and social media aspects of our organization. That person is trained in the peer support role, and oftentimes they'll likely refer that person to a youth support partner, is what we call our staff members, who are better able to respond to those messages on a more consistent basis. So usually Facebook is a quick kind of like meet and greet, and then it's handed off to somebody to provide more of that real, like raw peer support services. We've also done some snail mail in the past, which is kind of cool. It's kind of old school, but it's exciting for young people to see that we're spending time to write a letter to them, and that they're also spending the time to write a letter back to us. You know, everybody likes to get mail, so in the rural areas that we live in, networking is incredibly important. It helps a lot with hiring. It helps with making sure that we are, you know, using our model to its fullest potential, but also incorporating any other model that may help. It also helps a lot with collaboration outside of the regions, and also with organizations and agencies that we may not hear about consistently. So as far as hiring goes, we do a lot of online posting. So each of our regional offices are actually luckily located pretty close to universities or to colleges in general. So it's really helpful. We spend a lot of time marketing open positions to those areas to help to really intentionally get that peer-to-peer kind of role going. So we're, you know, having a young adult professional providing peer support to another young adult can be really helpful. We also try to use other resources that are available to us, such as Jobs in Maine, which is a website we have, or excuse me, the state of Maine has, as well as different listservs, weekly and monthly newsletters that are sent out via email, those kinds of things as well. Different organizations have a lot of different communities that they typically are in contact with, and that network can be really helpful in promoting open job opportunities. We try really hard as an organization to attend every possible event or program that we can. A lot of these are conferences or trainings, different events of any sort, really. You know, we're always representing our organization. We travel a lot to attend these events. You know, from my home office to the tip of the state of Maine is about a 3.5-hour, 4-hour drive. While I haven't quite gone all the way up to this tip of Maine for work, we do try to stay connected to the organizations in that area, usually via email. We really believe that by promoting youth peer support in any other organization, we can really kind of bring other organizations back to the idea of what youth peer support looks like to help to support young people to really be everything that they can. Let's see here. We get a lot of, oops.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, calling your attention to that, another question about the Facebook page on the public chat. They're wanting to know if,
oh, yep. Our Facebook page is public. The messenger application, the texts and emails that are sent via that platform are private, so nobody else can see if you write to us in a messenger form. If you write on the page, then it is public and anybody can see that. But most of the requests that we get there are sent in a private message. So we do get a lot of requests from different trainings and conferences to provide youth peer support trainings to other organizations. I've talked a little bit about this, but it's great to really get more and more people to really believe in what youth peer support can offer. It can really spread the idea and hopefully get more organizations tuned to the idea of providing peer support, youth peer support services. So there are a lot of challenges that do come from working in these rural areas. Transportation is always the biggest. It's really tough on staff as well as young people to be traveling to and from a lot of the events and programs that we have. So we do provide transportation as much as possible. There's, a ton of it. We do try to partner with other organizations in different regions that sometimes help as well, where they might have access to a van or they might have access to a bus or some other sort of transportation option that can help us to bring more young people closer to where we are. In saying that, we do try to host activities that are outside of our regions as well. So we do have different hiking events in the summer and spring and fall that we send an invite out to a larger array of organizations in the hopes that other young people can join these events without the transportation being such a big challenge. We've had a lot of success with that as well. It's a lot of fun to see young people from across the state come together and just really enjoy something that's fun. Seeing and hearing from other young people that have similar challenges or may have similar experiences can really kind of create this idea of like you are not alone, and really try to build that kind of leadership within the young person to really bring back to their communities. Recruitment can be really tough as well. It's hard to get young adults committed to doing this kind of work. There's a ton of travel. There's a lot of different relationships that you're creating with a lot of different personalities. There's a lot of different challenges that come our way. We hear a lot of really tough stories. It requires a lot of support on our organization's end. With peer support having such gray boundaries and gray ideas around what your relationship is supposed to look like, it can be really, really tough on staff. So it's really important to have a connection with staff members that is consistent. As supervisors, we really try to be available at all times. We never know when something's going to come up. And it's really just about validating some of those challenges that come up. We do offer pretty competitive wages, especially in comparison to some of the peer support organizations in the area. We have paid time off. We have different benefits that are offered. We do, obviously reimburse transportation. another thing about transportation is sometimes we have young people who are able to drive as well, which is nice because then they can bring themselves to events. We do travel to one-on-one meetings, which I spoke about a little bit previously. That can be really tough to travel one way to see a young person. We try to make those meeting times a little bit longer. So our typical meeting is 1 to 3 hours. When you're traveling further, we'll try to do a 3, 4, 5-hour meeting. As far as fidelity to the model, that can be a real big challenge as well. When supervising peers across the state, it can be tough sometimes to stay consistently connected. So we do try to do weekly check-ins. We also try to do group check-ins bi-weekly, and we also try to connect our staff members to different meetings and trainings that are happening in those regions to try to help them to stay connected to the larger peer support community. It can also be really tough at times to find things to do in rural areas. So, you know, a lot of our state it thrives on summer, spring, and fall when it's not freezing cold to be outside. You can do things like hiking, go swimming, go to the park, etc. So we try to create kind of a working document with different ideas of things to do. A lot of our one-on-one meetings, young people are looking to do something fun. The mall is something that they usually attend, although there's only 3 or 4 stores there. But trying to find fun things that can really promote that connection with the young person and the peer that they are working with. We try to get on as many mailing lists as we possibly can in order to keep track of different events and programs that are happening in our region as well as outside of our region. So as I stated earlier, networking is really important. So when attending these, we always try to have our business cards. We always try to promote peer support. We've tried to promote youth peer support and talk about a lot of the stories that we have that really promote the benefits of the program. We tend to as many of these as we can, which sometimes can be a little overwhelming. You know, we have a pretty small staff in each region, but being on a lot of these mailing lists can allow us to get a lot of the minutes and kind of the overviews of different programs that have happened back to us via email. So in each region we have 4 or 5 staff members currently. So that's really hard to spread across 50 different youth per region who are looking for one-on-one support, as well as the events that we have and the travel that it takes to get to a lot of these young people, as well as the travel to a lot of these events. Another challenge of working in this region is really the fidelity of virtual support. So we talked about the Facebook a little bit. It can be really challenging to make sure that we're staying true to our peer support model when using Skype or anything through writing. Writing can be really tough. It's so much easier to have a conversation and really check yourself when something comes up that maybe you should kind of adjust how you might say something. When writing, once it's done, it's kind of done. So it's really tough to stay true to the model using that. So we refer back to conversations a lot and discuss how that peer support models might be used there, and try to bring it back together to look at some different ways to be truer to the model in the future. So one of our models is really experiential learning, which is kind of learning from what you have done and talking about how you might do that differently in the future. So our biggest hope is to continue to move forward better than we did previously. So yeah, that's kind of the general overview of Youth MOVE Maine. I don't know if there are any additional questions from participants right now.
Any questions? If you could write them in the chat box for Sayre. I have a question, Sarah. You talked about it a little bit at the beginning of your presentation, but could you give us a little more detail about the actual training that your model requires for peer support?
Yeah, so we have a 3-day training within our organization. It has 8 different models that we pull from, including the intentional peer support, nonviolent communication, experiential learning, restorative practices. There's a lot of different models that we pull from to create kind of this. Like I said, it's a 3-day, 8-hour-a-day training. That really looks at these different models and then applies them to how it might look different for young people in comparison to adults in similar situations. So one of the biggest things to think about is how much control young people have over the decisions in their lives, and it looks very different for a 14-year-old than a 20-year-old as far as education or what you're wearing or what you get to have for dinner. Those things can vary quite a bit. So that training is pretty all-inclusive of kind of looking at the decisions that young people make and why they're making those decisions and how we can support them regardless of our personal ideas and our personal biases about those things. So oftentimes young people will make a decision and then there's 15 people who are telling them that was the wrong decision to make. And so our training is really all about supporting them really intentionally and withholding our judgments to try to find out why they may have made that decision and being there for them while they kind of navigate what the next steps may be. In partnership with that 3-day training, we do require all of our employees to take the State of Maine peer support training, which again borrows from the intentional peer support training, which is based out of Vermont. The woman who does the intentional peer support training, her name's Sherry Mead. And that training in partnership with our youth training is really pretty all-inclusive of those ideas in both adults and young adults.
Is there like a training or certification process that comes along with the training, or it's just completing the training classes?
Yeah, so our training has a certification. It's just a brief, that 3-day training. The State of Maine training it's a 9-week training. It's 1 day a week, except in the summers, I think they do like 4 weeks of 2 days a week. And that gives you like a provisional certification. After that, you are required to attend quarterly continuing education trainings, which are based on the models of peer support and are inclusive of anybody in the state of Maine who's looking to continue their certification, as well as the co-reflections that happen, I think, 4 times a year in each region. And then after, I think it's 2 years of practicing peer support, you receive your certification, and then have to continue with those continuing educations as well as the co-reflections to maintain your certification.
Okay. And another question that I had, because I don't see anything else in the chat box, so I'm going to ask my questions, but if anybody else has one, get it in there. So you mentioned using, recruiting from local universities to find people that would be willing to serve as peer support providers. So a couple of questions. One is, are there any other strategies for areas that may not be close to a university? And secondly, for even those kids that are coming out, or those young people that are coming from a university setting, are they reluctant to go to rural areas to provide peer support in the more rural areas if they're used to being in a university setting?
Yeah, so I'll answer your second question first. We're very honest about the amount of travel that is required for the organization. So that is one of the biggest discussion points we have when deciding whether or not to bring somebody onto our team. So there is obviously some reluctancy there. We try really hard to negotiate with each staff member what works best for them. So if they're traveling an hour and a half or, an hour and a half to meet with a young person, we may negotiate longer periods of time that they're meeting. So for that hour and a half travel, they may meet for 5 hours instead of a typical one, and make an entire day out of it. Another thing that we've done is kind of adjust the number of times per month that they do that travel. We've also may combine referrals in that region. So maybe one person goes to Millinocket, let's say, for 8 hours every Saturday, and any young person in the Millinocket area who's been referred to the program can meet with them during that time. So we try to really negotiate what works best for the organization as well as our staff and the young people that we're serving. The areas that aren't close to universities, we do a lot of promoting open positions through different organizations listserv. So we may reach out to an organization that we know of in different areas outside of our base region and just say like, hey, we're looking for youth peer support staff. Do you know of anybody? Can you send anybody this way? Can we maybe come meet with you guys one day and do a small presentation? There's some different options there. Yeah, we're really lucky to be close to these colleges, but it's tougher outside of that for sure.
All right, any other questions for Sayre from any of the participants? All right, well, I'm not seeing any right now. I think we'll have time for more questions at the very end if something percolates up that y'all have questions about. But now I think let's move to Carla. Thank you, Sayre, very much for that information. All right, Carla, if you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carla. I'm the Executive Director at Families Care, and we are a family-run peer support agency in central Nebraska. Nebraska is divided into 6 behavioral health regions, and 4 of those 6 currently have family-run organizations operating out of them. Omaha and Lincoln. Oops, sorry. We're going to go back to the map. Omaha, Lincoln, Norfolk, and Kearney. The regions are pretty large. Like central Nebraska, the Kearney region, we cover 15,000 square miles. So we also have a lot of travel to serve our families. Families Care also serves another region west of us, which has 18,000 square miles. The regions are, if anyone's familiar with Nebraska, Omaha and Lincoln are considered urban, and there is one urban city in central Nebraska. It's Grand Island with a grand population of 51,000. So most of the state west of Lincoln and Omaha is pretty rural. They do consider the western part of the state, what do they call it? I'm so sorry, lost my train of thought. Frontier. So they consider that frontier because there's generally 7 people per square mile. So it's definitely more rural than most of the state. The way we serve our families in Nebraska is there is state funding, state contracts to serve families with family peer support. There are some regional contracts to serve families. We also have a statewide family network grant in Nebraska, and then there's private foundation grants. Those are different ways we can serve our families. Let me go back to the next page, sorry. Okay, workforce development is tricky. It's pretty non-existent to be able to hire someone that's trained or certified in rural Nebraska. We typically are word of mouth. There's a lot of you know, how we can find families. Our statewide, in the whole state of Nebraska, there is currently around 33 employees working in the family-run organization. And let me go to the next slide. So how do we recruit the people that work with families? First of all, at our agencies, at the one I'm director of and the other ones in the state, one of the requirements, obviously, is to be a true peer. So at our agency in Kearney, we have 13 people on staff in the office, and everyone that works there is a parent, like myself, who has children with mental and behavioral health challenges, and has had experience utilizing the behavioral health system of care. It doesn't mean all of us have the exact same peer experience. Not everyone has a child. Not everyone's going to be assigned a family who has a child with ADHD and that their child also has ADHD, but it's a generalized peer experience that they've had experience getting psychological evaluations, med checks, that type of thing. So we do hire true peers, but typically once we find them, they can be, you know, they could be parents that have been served by our program in the past, which is my preference when I'm hiring. They could be people that were recommended by other professionals, and then we build the training, the skill building, and the certification from that point. I mentioned young adults there because we also, at Family Care, we have transitional youth-aged peer support, and that's through a regional contract. So I do hire young adults who have lived experience with serious emotional disturbance or mental or behavioral health challenges. One of the ways we do recruit them is through the university. We're fortunate in Kearney to have the University of Nebraska. And we started by building rapport with them by serving their interns. So we always have interns come in and work every semester. And they might just do filing. They might help us with support group planning and putting materials together. They shadow the peer providers and get some experience that way. But it often provides for us a good hiring pool once we have those interns in and get to know them. In fact, my last 3 transitional youth peer support providers were once interns of ours. And they just happen to have that lived experience as well. If I see it or not. The big key to our hiring is some flexibility. And I don't mean flexibility as far as the true peer experience, but often flexibility on schedules with people. If we hire someone who's still a student at the university, we allow them flexible hours to schedule their appointments with the consumers they're working with. And we have had individuals that prefer to work on the weekend. With our parent peer support providers, again, most of them are still actively parenting challenging children. So we've had to offer a lot of flexibility to recruit and retain good staff members by knowing that their children have special needs and they will need some flexible supervision, flexible scheduling, a lot of compassion, and obviously the job still has to be done, but the way to retain the staff, what I've found, is to make sure you offer that flexibility. Okay, and as I said in the previous slide, we really don't find people that have already had experience working in this field. I've been the director for almost 7 years, and I have yet to hire someone who already had been doing peer support prior to them starting their employment with us. So when we bring someone in, we're bringing them in from the ground floor, and it may be a parent that was on our caseload, and they discharged off the caseload just so they could then take the job. So we realize sometimes we're really starting at the bottom with people and helping, empowering them to providing the services. So I look at the training period as at least 6 months. Oftentimes it's a good full 12 months, but during that time, they're still going to start taking families and serving clients because we can't afford to just have them learning for a whole year. A lot of the training is by shadowing, and I usually, when I have a new family peer support specialists start, they have opportunity to shadow all of the other experienced peer support providers because everyone has their own unique flavor, their own unique style, and this shows them a whole array of different methods, though everybody's going with the same model. So they do a lot of shadowing. We make sure they shadow to face-to-face appointments, court, school meetings, family team meetings, any type of meeting we might attend with our clients. They're assigned a mentor within the office, and that's typically one of my staff members that has been there 3 or more years, and then that's their go-to person that does some more one-on-one mentoring with them. And then they receive what we have as a new advocacy training, and that training was developed by all of the directors in the state. It's a 3 full-day training. It's required to serve families by yourself without a shadow, and it covers an array of topics, most of which are preparing them for national certification. So all the way from confidentiality and ethics, strengths-based work, family-centered practice, stages of change, suicide prevention, engagement techniques, active listening, collaborative advocacy, trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, and how to affect change. So we have quite a length of things they're learning during that training. Other relevant trainings, we utilize anything we can get in our areas. So a lot of times the regional behavioral health districts will be offering trainings. We always take advantage of those. They're typically free. Or other professionals, we typically send all of our staff to the Juvenile Justice Conference because they get some really awesome training there, and it's a relatively inexpensive conference. Any other behavioral health conference that we can get a grant to send them to, they typically get a lot of great trainings there. Most of our contracts have, with the state and the region, require quite a bit of training. It's 24 ongoing hours per year. So we take advantage of any low-cost or free trainings we can get. The other part of the training is that on-the-job experience, and they start with a small caseload and a lot of supervision and shadowing and support initially as they get going. Okay, I already did kind of talk about the, I'm sorry, I got ahead of my slides here. The training material that was developed by the family-run organization. I broke that down here on this slide, so we'll go past that one. Okay, and then here's some of the other trainings we get within our communities, the mental health first aid for youth and adults. WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Planning, we feel is really crucial to peer support. So 100% of our staff gets that training within their first year of hire. And it's a week-long training. We've been fortunate. It's kind of expensive, but we've been fortunate enough to get grants to cover that. But the Wellness Recovery Action Planning is a great tool. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, that can help a family or youth or child even, or an adult, to develop their own plan to avoid crisis and their own plan to wellness by recognizing their triggers and then what can they do when they see those triggers. And there's some crisis planning involved in it too. So that's something we do one-on-one with families, as well as we've done some groups, WRAP groups as well. Okay, once we get a peer support specialist recruited, which is the hard part as we discussed, and then the training, and then they've been supported and coached and empowered, then they can take their test and get their national certification. Nebraska does have intentional peer support training for adults, and I would say half of my staff has gone through that, and it was a week-long training, and then they get a state certification at the end. There's a little portion of it for family peer support, but it's really, the intention was really for adult or young adult peer support. So we haven't developed a family peer support training in the state or a family peer support certification yet, but it is something that's in discussion. Another thing we started in the last 2 years with the help of our SAMHSA grant is we're developing a parent leadership academy, and with the slide you see now, that was the logo that we came up with and a mission statement. and this was done with parent involvement. So we spent the first year, this was 2 years ago, with a small group of committed parents that were willing and had a desire to see parents united in this way. And these are parents that were serving as volunteer. They weren't on our paid staff. And this is the logo and mission statement they came up with. And from that, we developed a training material for the Parent Leadership Academy. And then in this past year, we provided 2-day trainings. 3 different groups have met with about 10 to 15 parents in each group. And the training materials, let's see if I got that on the next slide. Well, let me talk about the purpose first. Obviously, some of the purposes of doing parent leadership is to educate parents, empower them, build hope, bring them together as a community, and prepare them, and then send them out as a voice, parent voice, and to tie it into this workshop we're doing today, is they do become a possible future workforce for the family peer support agencies. Some of the things that parents, what we found the parent leaders wanted to learn more about and what they desired to have is they want to be able to offer hope to other parents. So often, especially in a rural area, we feel pretty isolated when we have kiddos with behavioral health challenges. And a lot of our towns that we serve have 300 to 500 people living in them. And boy, people do not want the rest of the community knowing they're having problems with their kids. So a lot of times it's a very isolated place to live in. So we wanted to reach out to parents and offer hope. We wanted to get the idea that every voice matters out there and that we're all equal partners with our system providers. So often parents feel like they are the low man on the totem pole when it comes to getting those resources for their kids. We want to make sure they're validated and not patronized, not to having to go through it alone or feel shame about the situation, educating ourselves and others, bringing awareness to others. It's inspirational to some of the parents to work together. They're learning how to communicate effectively with one another and build their confidence. They want to make decisions for their own family and for the systems in our state, obvious empowerment, connectedness, and reducing stigma and numbers in strength. Let me go back one and talk a little bit more about the parent leadership. The training material itself. We're going to be presenting on it at the National Federation Conference in Texas. I don't know when it is, November, because it is kind of a new development. But we have a part 1 and a part 2. There's a level 1 training and then a level 2 training. And then once a parent has received both of those trainings, then there's a train the trainer. So then they could go on and lead these trainings. So our hope and our vision with this is to where the parents can take ownership of it and reach more parents statewide. Some of the things in the 2-day training, again, we talk about, just like we do with our employees, we talk about confidentiality and ethics, getting to know yourself and how things can affect you, things with your child, cultural and family diversity awareness, protective factors, communication. All these topics are covered during the training, and it's not just to sit down and learn. There's a lot of activity involvement. Leadership and problem solving and decision making are all things covered in level 1 training. And then level 2 training, we learn a little more about serving on teams that make decisions. So they get a little bit of education about system of care in the state, system and family leaders, how to serve on teams, belief in leadership, what are those opportunities to get involved, what type of groups they could get involved in, using data to have information to make your argument, and what is the role of families and youth on groups at the state level, and then where do we go from here. Those are some of the things we explore in the level 1 and level 2 training. Okay, some of the challenges and strategies we've had. Culturally relevant services is a challenge, and it's hard to find a bilingual workforce. We've struggled with that for quite a few years, and fortunately right now at Families Care I do have 2 Spanish-speaking family peer support workers, and that's just been a lifesaver. We can see that the services are much more relevant when they can discuss in their own language directly with their provider rather than through an interpreter. We've seen a lot of improved outcomes with having a bilingual workforce. And then the other challenge in our state is the far west part of the state in the frontier area. There just isn't much service available, and a lot of times by the time a family hears about family peer support, they're ready to send their child out of the home. So it's sometimes at the end of the work instead of at the beginning. So some of the strategies we want to continue to build a diverse staff, and we need to explore different avenues of recruitment. And I don't know if any of you guys have ideas or things that have worked for you in the recruitment area or with these strategies. I'll watch for comments if any of you have some to share. I do want to talk a little bit about the services we offer at Families Care. We have the Transitional Youth Peer Support Program, which I mentioned earlier, and it was a pilot program in our state about 4 years ago. And we wanted to offer peer support to kids that are 16 to 26. We just don't have a lot for that age range. And we developed a program utilizing the TIP process, Transition to Independence process. We got the training needed, and we have a caseload of 15 per advocate. That way they have plenty of time. They do travel to see the kids because we live where the traveling is required, and they are allowed to transport the young adults to help them meet their goals. One example of that is if we have a young adult that wants to go to community college, but they're aging out of the foster care system, and typically we would have a parent to take us for those college visits and filling out college apps. But if they don't have that support system, then their peer support person can act in that role and go along with them to that appointment. If they have court or any type of appointment they need support at, we can pick them up and transport them. If one of their goals is to seek employment, we can take them out picking up job applications. So it's really a neat program. We also have some flex funding in that program to help them meet their goals. Maybe remembering to take all their meds is a problem. We might take them to Walgreens and buy a little med storage container that breaks down pills per day. So just depending on the situation, we have some flexibility in that program. We also started some youth groups in central Nebraska using System of Care dollars recently. So that is for middle school and high school aged children, and they meet twice a month. They work on some life skill stuff, so we usually have a topic, and then part of the time is just for them to mingle and get to know each other, but part of it's activities, and then there might be a topic. The kids have chosen a lot of the topics, such as learning more how much drinking is considered a problem, or dating safety. Those are some of the topics the kids wanted speakers on, so we got speakers in for them. RAP groups, the Wellness Recovery Action Planning group. The picture there is we had a middle school RAP group since last summer, and the kids would meet one time a month on a Saturday, and we offered quite a few activities to expose them to different new things that could be coping skills for them. Like we did cake decorating one time, and we did a lot of art type things and games and science experiments, and just to help them explore their interest areas and maybe develop that into a coping strategy in their future. And then they're all developing a RAP plan in their own 3-ring binder, and we'll be continuing that. And then obviously we offer one-on-one support. Let's see what else I have here. Okay, then we have our family peer support programs. We have several different ones because of different funding sources. So there's one called Family Navigator, where we're assisting families that are calling a helpline, a nationwide or a statewide helpline. And then we work with family peer support with families that are referred by Child and Family Services for abuse and neglect. And typically the bulk of them, there is some mental health or substance issue involved. And then we have crisis response family peer support, and that's where the mental health agencies that are handling crisis response makes the referral, and we get in and spend 60 days with that family, helping them get the right resources in place. And then they can transfer into other programs if they time out on that one. And then we developed a new one a few years ago called Parent Peer Support. The difference in that is the eligibility criteria, where traditional family peer support is helping parents who have children with mental and behavioral health challenges. And we found there was a gap that we were having to let families discharge when there really wasn't a problem with their child, but it was more the parent's mental health or substance abuse that was causing parenting issues. So we developed the Parent Peer Support Program to serve those parents who themselves have mental health and behavioral challenges. And we do work on parenting goals, but it all ties back to goals around the parent's mental health. And Community Transition Peer Support is another one we developed. We have a mental health hospital in our town that our office is in. And through a personal experience with one of my adult children having to be put into that mental health hospital when she was 20, and then they discharged her to me. And even a parent with training and a lot of experience, I felt a little bit lost, like, okay, I have to take this person home, and how long will it be till I can get their meds and these things in place? It made me realize there was a gap there for parents. So we have the mental health hospital making referrals to us at discharge for families that want that peer support. And it's a 60-day program just to, again, get them into the resources they need. How do I get meds? Where's the wait list for therapy? You know, getting basic services in place. If they do need longer-term help, we put them in our traditional family peer support program. And then we do have family partners with probation, and that is kind of just getting going, but that's where the juvenile justice probation officer can make a referral for the parent to have peer support. And then, of course, we have family support groups and events in our regions. Usually we have to get private foundation funding to fund those projects, but we have support groups in 5 cities right now monthly. It's a lot of work and a lot of travel, but the families that go are looking for something, and we offer that to them. Typically, our format at family support groups is the parents and their children come together. We do a meal with all of them, and then we do some activities based around skills that families need to work on, but we make it fun. They don't realize we're actually working on stuff sometimes, but like cooperative work and positive parenting and praising, and even playing board games can turn into an educational experience with families that aren't used to doing those kind of things with their kids. And then we do have some big events throughout the year that we do with families, like a pumpkin patch event, a swimming party in July, those kind of some normalized family activities that they may not be able to afford otherwise. And it's a nice opportunity for parents who have kids with behavioral health challenges to get to spend that time with other families, not being nervous. Okay, what if my kid has a meltdown? We're all going through some of the same things together. The probation family partner, I see there's some questions about it. The role is very similar to traditional family peer support, and the funding is through juvenile justice. You have to go through quite a process to get registered as a service provider for probation. They pay $52 an hour, I believe, is their case rate, and the probation officer actually has to authorize the service in advance, and then the data has to be entered in their database. We've only had 3 families so far, so it's really relatively new to us, but the definition definitely fits the traditional family peer support definition, where we're providing services, resources, parenting skills, and strategies. So I could probably try to find some more information and get that to the institute here on how we got involved in that. And I'm sure other states are similar to Nebraska as far as their funding for juvenile services. Did that answer the question? Okay, yeah, I see a thanks there. Okay, any other questions about different services? We've tried to kind of think outside the window. When I first started about 7 years ago, we just did the traditional family peer support, and we've just seeing the value of peer support in general. And I'm a mom of 7 kids, and many of them have mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. I can see the benefits, so we've just tried to think outside the box and think of different ways to add peer support, not changing our vision or our mission at all, just using that peer support base to create unique and flexible programming. Any other questions or thoughts or ideas any of you guys have for peer support role or workforce development?
Carla, I would love to hear more about how you actually did that to be so successful in diversifying not only your funding sources, but, you know, establishing peer support in so many different sort of environments and so many different agency partners and, you know, being in a rural state. So how did you actually think through that?
Well, like I said, when I first started, we had a solid organization. They had a nice financial reserve that had come from some past funding, and we had a good relationship with our regional behavioral health district. And I think having that good reputation with them opened some doors for my ideas as I got in there. They'd already had a solid, and in fact, the regional administrator of our region was actually one of the founding board members of Families Care. So that helps a lot right there. So I'll just say that to preface that having the right people behind you that support you and are willing to listen to the ideas, that's huge. And that's the ideas for the transitional youth peer support and then the parent peer support for the parents with mental health. I went right to that regional administrator who believed in our vision and was able to get the financial backing for those two programs. So a lot of it is that relationship based, and I think that's what I would say about any of this. Our work with the mental health hospital, it's very relationship based and a lot of persistence because we got a grant to do it through Magellan, and we jumped in there and we made nice little resource bags that say Families Care on them, and we put water bottles and things that parents need whose kids in the hospital. You need a notepad to take notes and a pen and maybe some mints and lotion. We have nice resource bags all made up, and we talked the hospital into giving them to every parent, which they did for about 6 months, but they didn't make one referral. So it takes time, you know, it takes time and patience. And then every 2 months I call the hospital. I say, hey, let's touch base and we'll talk about the different families you've referred and question and answer session and are things going okay or what do you need from us? And so it's been a couple years of relationship building over there. We finally realized we needed to meet the doctors that would be making the referrals. So we scheduled that because if someone doesn't know what peer support is, it's kind of hard to talk them into making a referral for it. You know what I mean? So it's been a lengthy process. I do think the relationship is the key on that. I didn't mention that we also are doing some work with some county collaboratives and that type of thing for peer support and circle of security parenting classes. So I think the benefit of being in a rural area is that there aren't a lot of services. So if you have a solid agency that can offer something, people are willing to listen to your ideas. And we have some longevity on our staff right now, you know, people that have been there more than 5, 6, 7 years. I think that's helped contribute to getting a foot in the door. But really the basis has just been seeing a need or seeing a gap in service, doing some programs development and brainstorming, not just me, but with my staff, and then presenting it to the right people, and they either are interested or they're not. Do you know what I mean? Just kind of putting it out there. That's been the main key for us. And then that persistence and keeping, like we get referrals from DHHS for our child and family services, families. And we have a quarterly meeting with them. If I drop the quarterly meeting, which we did last year, the referrals go down. and then I picked him back up. The referrals went back up because they need to be reminded of the value of peer support. And here's how we can help you do your job better. Here's how we can help your families so that they meet better outcomes. So that's kind of been our premise for getting new things started. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for that. Does anyone